Maren Whitlock was 28, polished, respected, and tired in a way most people never noticed. To the world, she was the young CEO of Whitlock Mobility, a fast-growing luxury transport company in Boston. She wore clean suits, spoke in controlled sentences, and never let anyone see panic on her face. But that Friday evening, inside a private service bay behind the Harborview Hotel, her calm was hanging by a thread. The Ferrari was not just a car. It had belonged to her father. 2 years earlier, before he passed, he had driven it to her office, tossed her the keys, and said, "One day, when the company gets too loud, take the long road home." Maren had not taken that road once. Now, on the night before her company's biggest investor dinner, the car would not start. The dinner was not about showing off. It was about proving her late father's company had not become a cold machine under her leadership. And every mechanic she hired had failed. Gavin Holt, the service manager, had brought in specialists, scanners, laptops, and quiet excuses. Each hour cost money. Worse, each hour made Maren feel like the universe was testing whether she really belonged in the chair her father left behind. So when a rain-soaked single dad appeared near the service entrance and calmly said the car was not broken, Maren should have dismissed him. Instead, she watched him fix it with 2 fingers. No tools, no speech, no performance, just listening. His name was Miles Rourke. He was 34, a part-time night cleaner at the hotel, and the father of a 7-year-old girl named Nora, who was waiting in the lobby with a coloring book and a half-eaten blueberry muffin. Miles did not stay to enjoy the shocked silence. He walked away before Gavin could ask what switch he had pressed, before Maren could decide whether to thank him or interrogate him, before anyone could turn his quiet moment into a spectacle. Maren followed him out. The hotel hallway smelled of rain, floor polish, and expensive perfume from guests heading toward dinner upstairs. Miles moved like someone trying not to take up space. "Miles," she said. He stopped, surprised she knew his name. Then he noticed the small employee badge clipped under his jacket. "Yes, ma'am." Maren disliked being called that, though she had never corrected anyone before. "You fixed my car." "I pressed back a loose safety connector," he said. "Someone probably disturbed it while removing the passenger panel." Gavin's team missed it. Miles gave a small shrug. "They were looking for a big problem. And you weren't. I don't have a budget for big problems." That almost made her smile. Before she could answer, a little girl's voice called from the lobby. "Dad, did the fancy red car wake up?" Miles turned, and something in his face changed. The guardedness softened. His daughter, Nora, ran to him with a drawing in her hand. She had warm brown eyes, 2 crooked braids, and the serious expression of a child who had learned to wait patiently in adult places. Miles crouched. "It woke up," he said. Nora looked past him at Maren. Was it having a bad dream? Maren did smile then, despite herself. "Maybe," she said. "Your dad helped it." Nora beamed like that explained everything. Gavin entered the hallway behind Maren, face stiff with embarrassment. "Miss Whitlock," he said carefully, "we should discuss what happened." Maren turned to him. "We will." Gavin lowered his voice. "With respect, I don't think hotel cleaning staff should be inside a restricted service bay." Miles stood slowly. He did not defend himself. That bothered Maren more than if he had argued. Nora's fingers tightened around his sleeve. Maren looked at Gavin, then at Miles. "He didn't enter to steal attention," she said. "He entered because he heard what trained people ignored." Gavin's face colored. Miles shook his head slightly, as if asking her not to make it bigger. Maren noticed. That was the first thing about him that stayed with her. He had the skill to embarrass people, but not the hunger to do it. A security guard approached from the lobby desk, holding a folded paper. "Miles," the guard said, uncomfortable, "front office says your contractor pass expired yesterday. They want you off property until it's renewed." Nora looked up at her father. "Are we in trouble?" Miles took the paper quietly. "No, sweetheart." But Maren saw his hand, the smallest tremor. Not fear exactly. Pressure. The kind that came from rent, groceries, school shoes, and one more door closing at the wrong time. For the first time that evening, Maren forgot about investors, engines, and reputation. She looked at the man who had fixed her father's Ferrari without tools and was now being removed from the building like an inconvenience. Wait, she said. The guard paused. Miles looked at her, cautious. Maren held his gaze. My car needs a road test. Gavin frowned. Miss Whitlock, any of our technicians can. No, Maren said. Calm. Final. She looked back at Miles. I want the person who heard it. Miles did not move. I'm not a mechanic here. No, Maren said softly. But maybe you should have been. For a moment, the hallway went still around them. Nora whispered, Dad. Miles looked down at his daughter, then back at Maren. And Maren realized the suspense in his silence was not about whether he could fix cars. It was about why a man who understood machines so deeply was cleaning hotel floors at night. Miles almost refused. Maren could see it before he spoke. His eyes moved once toward Nora, then toward the lobby doors, where rain blurred the city lights beyond the glass. He was weighing pride against necessity. She knew that look because she had worn a richer version of it in boardrooms since she was 25. I can listen to it, Miles said. That's all. Maren nodded. That's all I'm asking. 10 minutes later, the Ferrari rolled out of the hotel's underground bay and onto the wet Boston streets. Maren drove. Miles sat in the passenger's seat, quiet, one hand resting near the dash but never touching anything without permission. Nora sat safely in the back, buckled in, holding her coloring book like an official clipboard. The engine purred, then hesitated faintly at the second light. Miles tilted his head. There, he said. Maren glanced over. There what? It's still catching late. But it started. Starting isn't the same as being well. That sentence landed harder than it should have. Maren kept her eyes on the road. You talk about cars like people. Miles looked out at the rain. People are harder. Cars at least tell the truth if you listen long enough. Nora leaned forward slightly. My dad used to build race cars. Miles' jaw tightened. Nora. What? You did. Maren did not react too quickly. She had learned that sudden interest made guarded people close doors. At a shop? She asked. Miles was quiet for a few seconds. In England, he said finally. Then here. Restoration work. Classic performance cars mostly. That's a long way from night cleaning. He smiled without humor. Life takes corners fast. Maren waited. The Ferrari moved through the city, past restaurants glowing gold, past office towers where people still worked late, past a small flower stand closing under plastic sheets. Miles eventually spoke again. My wife got sick after Nora was born. Not dramatic, not sudden, just expensive and slow. I sold my tools first, then my share in a small garage. After she passed, I took whatever hours let me pick Nora up from school. Maren's hands tightened on the steering wheel. I'm sorry, she said. Miles nodded once, accepting the words without leaning on them. Cars were easier to lose than her. The silence after that felt respectful, not empty. Maren turned onto a quieter road near the water. The Ferrari's headlights stretched across the wet pavement. My father loved this car, she said, but I kept it locked away because every time I saw it, I remembered that he trusted me with everything before I was ready. Miles looked at her then. Maybe he didn't trust you because you were ready, he said. Maybe he trusted you because he knew you'd become ready. Maren swallowed. No one at work spoke to her like that. They either feared her, flattered her, or waited for her to fail politely. Miles simply said what he saw. The engine gave another small delay. Miles leaned forward, listening. Pull over under that awning. Maren stopped near a closed bookstore. Rain rolled down the windshield in silver lines. Miles got out and opened the passenger side again. Maren stepped out with him, holding an umbrella over both of them before she thought about it. He noticed. Thank you, he said. The space between them became strangely intimate, lit by street lamps and reflected red paint. Not romantic in a loud way. Just two tired adults standing close enough to feel the warmth of another person's patience. Miles removed a small trim cover by hand. Maren watched carefully. How can you diagnose it without tools? I'm not diagnosing everything, he said. Just the part everyone skipped. He pointed to a tiny aftermarket tracker hidden near the wiring. Maren frowned. That isn't factory. No, and it's interrupting the signal. Bad install. Maybe from a previous security upgrade. Maren's face changed. Her company had recently switched security vendors. One of her own executives had insisted on it. Miles saw the look. That means something to you. It might. His voice lowered. Then don't accuse anyone tonight. Verify first. That advice surprised her more than the repair. Most people would have pushed drama. Miles pushed caution. Back at the hotel, Gavin was waiting with 2 senior staff members and a forced apology on his face. The investor dinner had already started upstairs. Maren could hear soft music through the ceiling. Gavin approached quickly. "Miss Whitlock, I reviewed the bay footage. Mr. Rourke shouldn't have been near the car, but clearly there was no damage. We can settle this quietly." Maren looked at him. Quietly. Gavin glanced at Miles. "I mean, for everyone's benefit." Miles stepped back slightly. He understood what men like Gavin meant by everyone. Maren did too. But before she could respond, her phone buzzed. A message from her assistant, Liana, appeared on the screen. Security vendor contract was pushed by Rowan Vale. Same vendor had access to your father's Ferrari records. Need to talk. Maren's pulse slowed in the way it did before a hard decision. Rowan Vale was her chief operations officer, her father's former protege, the man waiting upstairs beside her investors. Maren looked at Miles, then at the service bay, then at the elevator doors. The broken Ferrari had not been the real problem. It had been the warning. And the only person who heard was a single dad everyone else had tried to send away. Maren slipped her phone into her pocket. "Miles," she said, "I need one more favor." He gave a tired half-smile. "That usually means trouble." "No," Maren said, looking toward the elevator. "This time it means truth." The elevator doors opened to a private dining floor filled with soft jazz, low conversation, and the kind of expensive lighting that made every glass look like it belonged in a magazine. Maren stepped out first. Miles followed a few feet behind, uncomfortable in his damp jacket, with Nora holding his hand and trying to walk quietly. He had asked if they should wait downstairs. Maren had said no, not because she needed an audience, because she was done letting good people stand outside important rooms. Rowan Vale was near the windows, smiling with a glass of water in his hand, surrounded by investors. He was silver-haired, controlled, and charming in a way that made people trust him before they checked his words. When he saw Maren, his smile widened. "There you are," Rowan said. "We were worried the car stole you away." Maren stopped beside the long table. It almost did. A few people laughed lightly. Rowan looked past her at Miles. His expression barely changed, but Maren caught the flicker. Recognition. Not a Miles. Of the problem. Maren placed the small tracker on the table. The room went quiet. "I found this in my father's Ferrari," she said. "Actually, Mr. Rourke found it." Rowan gave a calm smile. "Security hardware. Nothing unusual. Then you won't mind if we have an independent technician review the installation records." "Tonight?" Rowan asked, still pleasant. Maren looked at him without blinking. "Now." The warmth left his face for half a second. That was enough. Liana, Maren's assistant, entered from the side hall with a tablet. "Maren, I checked the vendor documents. The device was billed as part of a fleet protection package, but your father's personal car was never listed in the approved scope." Rowan set his glass down carefully. "This is being handled very dramatically." "No," Maren said. "Dramatic would be accusing you before verifying. I'll learn better tonight." Her eyes moved briefly to Miles. He stood near the wall, one hand on Nora's shoulder, asking for nothing. Maren turned back to Rowan. "You pushed a vendor into our system without full disclosure. You also advised me to cancel tomorrow's board review because the company was not ready. If that review had been delayed, the fleet contract would have gone through without anyone noticing the access issue." One investor leaned forward. "Is this true?" Rowan's face hardened, but his voice stayed polite. "I made a strategic decision your father would have understood." Maren felt the old wound stir. For years, Rowan had used her father's name like a key, opening doors in her confidence that should have stayed locked. This time, she did not flinch. "My father taught me that strategy without honesty is just control wearing a suit." The sentence landed softly, but the room felt it. Rowan looked toward the exit. Maren did not stop him when he left. She simply turned to Liana. "Pause the vendor contract. Call legal. Quietly, correctly, and with records." And she looked at Gavin, who had followed from downstairs and now stood near the back with a lowered gaze. "Mr. Holt, your team is not being fired," Maren said. "But from now on, nobody in my company dismisses someone because their uniform looks less important." Gavin nodded, ashamed. "Understood." Miles exhaled slowly, like he'd been holding his breath for years. The dinner did not continue the same way. It became less polished, more honest. Maren told the investors the truth. The company had grown too fast, trusted too easily, and needed a cleaner foundation before expansion. She expected disappointment. Instead, one of the older investors said, "That is the first real leadership I've heard tonight." Later, after the guests left, Maren found Miles on the balcony outside the dining room. Nora had fallen asleep on a sofa inside, wrapped in Maren's coat. The city below glittered with rain. "You could have embarrassed Rowan more," Miles said. "I wanted to," Maren admitted. "But you didn't." "No," she looked at him. "Someone told me to verify first." Miles smiled faintly. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Maren leaned on the balcony rail beside him, close enough that their shoulders almost touched. "I checked your contractor file," she said. "Before you get offended, I was looking for a way to renew it. And I found an old article about Rourke and Vale restoration." Miles went still. "Vale?" she asked gently. Miles looked down at the street. "Rowan was an early investor. When my wife got sick, I missed payments. He bought my share through a debt clause I should never have signed." Maren's voice softened. "So he knew who you were." "Maybe, maybe not. Men like him forget the people they step over." Maren turned toward him. "I don't want to step over you." Miles looked at her then, really looked at her. Not as a CEO, not as a rescue, just as a woman trying to become better than the room that raised her. "What do you want?" he asked. Maren glanced through the glass at Nora asleep under her coat. "A proper restoration division," she said. "Honest work. Patient hands. Cars with stories, not just price tags." Miles gave a quiet laugh. "That sounds expensive. It sounds necessary. And me?" Maren's smile was small but brave. "I want you to help build it. As a consultant first. With normal hours. School pickup protected. Your name on the door only when you're ready." Miles looked away, blinking once. "You don't owe me that." "No," Maren said. "But I owe the company better. And I think—" She stopped, suddenly less certain as a person than she had been as a CEO. Miles waited. "I think I'd like to hear what you notice when everyone else is talking." His expression softened. "That sounds like a dangerous job." "Very." Nora stirred inside and mumbled. "Did the red car go back to sleep?" Miles and Maren both laughed quietly. The next morning, the Ferrari drove along the coast road for the first time in 2 years. Maren was behind the wheel. Miles sat beside her, listening to the engine with a peaceful half-smile. Nora sat safely in the back, drawing a red car with 3 people inside it. At a stoplight, Maren looked over. "Still catching late?" Miles listened. Then he shook his head. "No," he said. "It's finally breathing right." Maren looked ahead as the light turned green. For the first time in years, she took the long road home.